Good morning, everyone. Today is Thursday, December 11th, 2025. The time is 10:15 a.m. and I call the regular meeting of the Mount Vernon IPA Water.
Sure. Chairman, Patterson Howard,
Here.
member Vanderpool,
Here.
member, Morton.
Yeah.
Member Johnson is absent today. He notified, us that he would not be here, and member McDonough.
Present.
We have 3 voting members for a quorum, Madam Chair.
We can proceed.
Yes. First matter on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from November 13, 2025. Has the board had a chance to review the minutes?
Yes. Yes.
Is there any motion to approve the minutes as proposed?
I make a motion that we approve the minutes from November 13th of 2025.
Motion by member Vanderpool. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by member Morton. All in favor?
Aye.
That passes 3-0. The matter is approved for the minutes being approved. We next matter on the agenda is a financial report. We have financial statements that were part of the packet. I don't know if the controller, the treasurer, or the IDA, Morton can go through them. Julie can help too, whatever you would like to report.
And start on that activity.
Right.
She, that is happening, so. A lot, but, for our last month. That, November, that we have, of course, the income statement, the fees and the, rent. Fees is 47,056. A little bit of interest and from, of course, our accounts is $254. Total of 47,311. Expenditures, as you know, once that number actually kind of transitioned out. So the only things that we had was the salary and benefits, of the final payments of that, 1480. So bringing in net kind of earnings to 45,31. If you look at the balance sheet, total assets is 4,568,122. Of course, that is divided up into our several different accounts. Operating is $1.7 million. So we have also, as it pertains to our pilot account, 997,000 and 496. Of course, as you know, that those get paid out twice a year. So the money comes in, it's deposited into those accounts, and then on payment time for it paid out. So for example, we actually just cut the checks this week, yesterday, for the second half of 2025 to the jurisdictions this week. Will show up as paid out. Next month's your financial report. The liabilities, again, related to pilots being paid out, which you paid out twice a year. To the jurisdictions, it's 940,020 when we basically looking at it from the standpoint of closing balances, 2.7 million to $1,754.05. So that's the transactions, pretty much for the month of November. If you look at the actual pilot schedules, you'll find that we pretty much are collecting all of our pilots. And so, at one point, it was kind of the narrative about pilots not being collected. Since we've taken over, we've done a good job at one, making them pay timely, and two, also recouping that which was not paid. Got 1 or 2 were passed out that we're still working on, but those are and we take legal action on them. We already have authority to do so, and so I think we're in good position as it pertains to what is still outstanding and what the status is of those. So, we look at also same thing when it comes to the fees and rents. Again, we've been doing a very good job at being all of those things. And, the, accountant actually, Durage has actually been very, very active in looking at all the contracts and trying to make sure that we do their feet to the fire, fiscal responsibilities. That's the report.
It's the question for the public's information. How do funds end up, when you're talking about the balance sheet in each of the different accounts? And how is it that we have an operating account that has $1.7 million? Could you please explain that?
Yeah, so what happens is that the fees that come in, to the IDA based upon even things like, for example, most of the money that's there now in operating account came from recent closings. That happened based upon projects, right? And then the board decides on what money actually gets moved from operating into the interest bearing account, such as the money market account, which we approved, I think, recently to move money from operating to that. Because of help to try to make money work for us. As it pertains to escrows, all of the pilots are required to have these escrows just in case they get to a place where they can't pay their actual pilot payment. So that if they become too delinquent, then board then decides to take it from their escrow to pay it so that the jurisdiction's gonna get paid out for it until we figure out what the next action is on it. The pilot account is simply that. It's really, so it almost serves as also as an escrow, but not the escrow. You know, there's an escrow for in case you have to pay it, and then there's the pilot account, which actually holds the payments for that year. So what happens is they pay it in January or somewhere around about January. That payment has to go out in June. They pay it in June. That payment has to go out in December, so it sits there until it has to be paid out. That's why we make sure we separate what is the operating money from that, which is the pilot payment.
And the escrow account is an interest bearing account, and the pilot account is not, because you can't invest that
Correct.
funding, because you know you have to spend it that year.
Correct.
And I signed the checks already this morning, and I think what this portion of pilots were sending about 90,000 to the county, almost 250 to the city, and over $500,000 to the school district.
I think it's 800.
Right, so, you know, and we just say that because our pilots, your pilots, they say no taxes. And said tax payments, if you're not collecting taxes, they're just a structure. And so, you know, the projects are prepared.
Yeah.
That's generally paid one time, so.
Underneath their contract, right? As we know, in the previous contracts were not all of that favor money in the sense of how they grow, right? How they should change the payments that get to the jurisdictions. So I haven't said that too, so while I'm on this, I guess financial board. So there is one pilot, which I'm sure we'll have some conversation about, so at some later point. But there's also the pilot with Titus, 60 West First Street, which according to their pilot, there are, which is interesting how that pilot got written, because that pilot actually says that they're paying full taxes, right, as part of their pilot. So somewhere along the line, around about 2022, somehow the assessment on that property kind of got messed up. There's errors there. And so we've been working with the assessor to correct that. In fact, I think you may have seen in city council agenda last night, there was some item related to them and that. Because they have not paid the taxes for those years. They paid the revenues and for the county and the city, but they've not paid the actual tax value, because the tax value. So I think we were up to about 170, something like that. Something like that,
So-
something like that, of taxes, that they owe. And so, once that all is completed, we will then get those payments from them and get those things out to the jurisdictions.
So actually, this is a financial matter, but I'm fairly new to this. And what I would like to suggest is that we have a resolution on the next agenda that all developers who come before for payment of any sort, you probably already done, you already do this informally, must be current on taxes to appear on any sort of request for payment. Does the board have an appetite for a resolution like that?
Absolutely.
I think you're doing it already, but I'd like to have it formalized so that we, in particular, the project you were just discussing, Titus owes taxes. There's another project that wants to come before you for a leasehold, like in the downtown area. I think that they need to have taxes. I just learned yesterday or the day before they have outstanding taxes, as a
They-
partnership.
They actually resolved this.
Oh, excellent. But I think that they need to come to us showing us that their taxes are current as part of their package.
Yeah, well, that would make sense, and it would go along the lines of the, with the requirement for the planning board too. I mean, where we require them to make sure that they are up to date in their taxes and then for the planning. And they usually notify us when comptroller's office, and we look it up to make sure. So, yeah.
Well,
And then homeowners also.
oh, absolutely, the private,
Because there
yeah.
are people who own homeowners and want to come before us to talk about pilots and other things and subjugation of loans and, we can't just allow people to kick our expenditures down each can and have room while they try and make more money at our expense. So
What is a home?
home loans, so through the Urban Renewal Agency, it is HUD funding that provides investments, to create affordable units as well as to maintain affordable units. And so it is very low interest, loans that are given.
Usually around 2%, 3%, depending.
Overall, that's a low interest.
That's what it is.
You can't find those, and, we've made loans for $1 million, and again, as you said, the old contracts were written poorly.
Yes.
And some of those old contracts basically provided a loophole that made people who all the time download and put in a claim for 90% of my money, but I don't hit 91% or whatever the percentage is, then I never have to start repaying this loan.
Yeah.
And so you have people who would have stayed at a different threshold and continue to get money and just do the same game over and over again. And that's not healthy, because home monies, when they're paid back, go back into our city's coffers. They don't go back to HUD. So each year we get an allocation, and when we're able to give that money back out and it gets paid back, it comes in as unrestricted income to the Urban Renewal Agency, where we can use it for economic investment and development. Anything. We can use it for job creation. We can use it for infrastructure. We can use it for further investment into housing and innovative projects. But when that money doesn't come back in, then we only get our allocation year after year.
So one of the things as I'm talking to this board, this is again my second meeting, is, we can't fix what was done prior. We can't.
And make it better going forward.
We can make it better going forward, and to do that, we need policies and procedures and resolutions that reflect the values of this board. And so I'll be periodically asking you questions. Darius will be producing those resolutions for us so that we can move that ball forward. So if you have ideas or thoughts, please let me know. But certainly, no one should be appearing before you without all of their fees, taxes, everything paid.
Stephanie, question about the assessment for Titus.
Yes.
It's the property plus is listed as homes for the aged. Why is that?
That was based on I think when they filled out the application, it's considered low income.
Well, there are 5 schools, Vernon City School District kids living in that building right now. So how is it accurate to classify it as home for the aged?
Well, that's probably, I'm not aware of how many kids maybe they have, the grandparents have,
These are
Even-
criminal members. I told them yesterday.
oh,
So that, I would say that's not accurate, that property class.
Well, may I suggest that there's a compliance issue that we probably have moving forward, that we can get a list of issues and start working on, because I don't know that we monitor, once the pilot is out, I don't know if we monitor them.
Oh,
And if you remember last meeting, you made me the compliance person, so I'm
Okay.
happy to do that.
So a couple other questions. So this, in that referral letter you sent last night,
yes,
it goes back to, well, 2 things. There, it mentions an attachment, but there's no attachment.
okay,
So I'd like to see that
sure.
attached additional documentation that you mentioned.
I did submit it though, but I don't know why.
Also, that goes back to 2022. What about years prior to that? Like 2021, in the IDA audited financial statement, is listed that 174,000 of real property taxes were exempted and no piling commitments. In 2020, it's listed that $33,300 of real property taxes were exempted. Is that accurate? So how did the assessment jump from 33,300 in 2020 to 174,735?
That's not the assessment. I think you're talking taxes.
Well, okay, the real property taxes.
You're
So,
talking taxes.
so why would the real property, why would that jump like
The assessment changed in the clerical error. The correct assessment is 23,000. That's the correct assessment that the power started with.
that? Okay,
And now the incorrect assessment was 115,208. So that's why you're gonna see the difference in the taxes.
okay, so 2021, shouldn't that be included in what they owe?
No, based on my research, the error started in 2022 through 2025.
Okay,
It
so
was
then,
correct in 21 and it started in 2022.
okay, so then the IEA's audited financial statements are not correct. Right?
I would have to.
Yeah, I pulled this directly, 2021, page 16, it says real property tax exempted, 174,739, and there's nothing. So that's not correct.
So we'll have to go back and look at it.
Yeah, I would have.
I
I'd have to review that.
In 2023, the real property tax is exempted for a Titus, 184,000. It's the identical number to the column next to it for Target. Now, Target, really, the exempted number should be about $780,000. So it looks like somehow the numbers for Titus were dropped into the column
You know,
for Target.
you didn't know what it.
In the audited financial statement for 2023.
Well, send it,
Page
send it
20,
to me
page
and I'll,
20.
maybe we'll send it to all of it.
And so what, doesn't this have knock-on effects for the data reported to the state? Because that's a fairly large difference.
Well, I said, once you send them to us, then what we'll do is we'll send them to the auditors, have them look at it, and if it need be, then we'll have to change the report into patterns. That's all. So that's what we'll do. So we'll follow back up with it. I'm not sure how that could possibly happen with the auditors, but.
Well, that's for me a big question too, because that means it was missed
I
all along the line.
think if I'm not mistaken, I think Julie and I, we did get a feedback from the state auditors regarding the tariff support for us to review that and we amended. And I sent it to Julie. They were questioning, I think something with Target and something else, but I don't know. if it's-
That's correct, and we made a correction to the Paris report, but the state comptroller's office does not require that a correction be made to the audit report.
We did.
But if that's the case, but yeah, we would require that to be done. So, I mean, again, if that was, it doesn't, recommendation, then we need to make sure. So again, Chris,
I'll
send
send you
it
the-
to
send
me
you the
and then
report.
we'll send it off to the auditors and have them go back and look at it. They may have to do an amendment, to that.
Say that when an auditor comes in, they only look at the current information available to them. And then they do random sampling, so things could slip through and we'll fix them as soon as we know that.
Yeah, well, all of that is because what happened again is in my, in my auditing, internal auditing, all of this with the taxes on is how we identified what the problem was. And that's when we started to go back and look at it further to find out how far and how long it said that she had occurred. So that's why we're in the corrective, mode to get this done. So any information around it, we need to have so we can make sure we are doing the right thing.
Right, and I would say the Titus, project, they're one of the few I never seen a power agreement where they're responsible to pay taxes in full.
Yeah,
And I really never see.
it's very speculative as to why that was the agreement.
I agree for differently, so.
And there's school taxes, so I'm looking at your referral to the 2023 says 21,229 in school taxes, right? That's the full tax load
Which one?
for 2023?
I'm not sure.
This is the referral. I'm reading right for your left. This is what they owe, because remember, they didn't pay anything, right?
Right.
Because of the tariff.
Yes, yes.
So now they have to pay what they actually owe. But so this illustrates a great point in that what they're paying doesn't seem to cover the local cost to educate the children coming out of that building. Using the SCORES method, it's about $10,000 to local taxpayers for each kid in that building. So they're paying taxes of $21,000. They're short on what the real cost to educate the kids coming out of that building.
Well, that's,
450.
well, that's also under, that's under the new, rules, universal tax exemption policy. We can't go back like.
No, I'm just stating a fact about
This
that. That's all we do.
We're all stating and we've all continuously stated the fact that pilot agreements before this board came into effect were very harmful for the community, that they were not properly vetted, that we lost out on. And that is something that we've been doing course corrections on. And with the study that we've already authorized, we will continue to do course corrections on the challenges live on forward because of what happened before. So we definitely acknowledge the poor deals that were happening in the past. We cannot go back and change those, but we can make sure that those places that are not supposed to have children in them, or if that is the issue. You're saying on the property that the property is listed as a home for the aged. I don't know if home for the aged is a Warburg type home for the aged, or a home for the aged is a 55+ building.
It may not matter, it may just be a category that is 30% AMI and under or whatever. It may not mean anything.
For
That's what I was gonna ask the question, like, what does that mean?
people of a certain age, but does that also mean there are some senior buildings in Mount Vernon that we know are senior buildings and children should not be living there?
I think the developer's aware of it.
This may not be, we don't know if this is a building that says it's the same on their thing that no children should be living there, or did they say there will be no children, right? Because.
But
this-
that's something that needs to be known. So,
Right.
yeah, so I agree with that, but I think that, so because of what's happening now, right? Which back then, or whenever this was, that it may have been clear that, right, that you have a building that is designed for seniors, that they're not necessarily becoming caretakers for their grandchildren, they're not allowed to be in this, so on and so on. The dynamics have changed now, that more grandparents are absolutely taking care of children. So for us, as we begin to continue to move forward and vet these projects, we have to make sure that we have a clear understanding of what that means as it pertains to also potentially children being in the building, if children are allowed or not. And if that should make a difference as to how we evaluate the project right, whether it should, and what kind of pilot it actually may get or may not get,
There-
right, going forward. So,
there is-
government, yeah, okay, be, you know, because, again, we're in the midst of correcting
Yep.
stuff that has been for decades in a certain way. And so turning this around has not been easy, right? At all, and it has not been a perfect science at all, right? And so as we learn information more, we have to then take that information and apply that information to what we are now creating as the new policy procedure, moving forward. So that's why I didn't ask the question like, so what does that designation mean? Because we need to make sure that for all designations now, we need to know what that means,
Definition.
right?
Right.
So that we can clearly make the right decision around what kind of pilot, what kind of, financial, reductions, if at all, any.
Yeah.
Right.
And knows he's got kids in the building. In his letter to us, he says that he's willing to give public school enrollment data for the project. So in this letter, he acknowledges, or they acknowledge that there are children there. But that's why it was curious to me to see on the assessment roll, it's listed under this state designation.
Well,
I didn't understand.
but, well, I would like to say, I'm sorry, in regarding to with the assessment data, all of the property classifications are listed based on the state designation. So the home from the eighties, that was placed back in probably 2009, 2010, prior to this building being built. I'm not aware of the children that's on the property now, the five, like the controller said. Now you have grandparents becoming caretakers. We're in a different time now. But as far as the valuation, I assume that was based on without having any children on the premises. I'm not sure. I can review based on that.
And it's also clear, you weren't
I wasn't
the assessor at that time.
But and also too, I can review the project now, and also I would have to verify it with the buildings department. And then I can check to see what the designation that I can change that classification.
But I think the more important,
I don't change the class, I'm sorry.
but I think the more important question though, Stephanie, for your point is that designation itself, does it or does it not even allow for children to be in that? Because see, that's what I don't, I hear the definition for their aging, but I don't know what that means. Right? And that's why I'm asking, that's what I'm saying, let's find out what that means. But if clearly that means no, then there's a violation here that needs to be addressed. If it does, then it means that we need to understand how that impacts what's happening.
But also too, I'm sorry, also to control it, if that's the case, then we would definitely have to revise that as we've been doing with UTAC. To include that, if it is or it's not, that there needs to be a
That's-
foundation.
Yes.
I agree, because the classification, to be honest with you, the state classifications is just really black and white, it's really no gray in between. But I will review it and move forward.
So what I'm hearing from this as as an administrator, as an operations person, is that there needs to be a very good application process, which lists in the application the number of children, et cetera, and it needs to be incorporated into the agreement moving forward. I suspect we do that now.
We're doing that?
And I suspect we do not do that in 2010. And so we are talking about something, when you talk about office for the aged, like under HUD, because of the number of grandparents that became parents, has changed their classification from everyone 62 and older to a 55 and older classification, where children would be allowed in a building where 62 and older they would not be. So HUD has changed its rules, although they don't necessarily apply here, but they do affect the state's rules. So moving forward, what I think we need to do is ensure that we are monitoring for compliance, this is what I'm hearing, monitoring for compliance, that application and the agreement itself. And I suspect not having an IDA director for a long period of time, because, You have to remember, we did not have an IDA director. We had a person acting in the role who was not empowered to be an IDA director, to get a monitoring.
Let's just be clear, we didn't have an IDA director. No, we had an IDA director since about 2019, right, or 2018, so, right, yeah, so.
And that's being repaired in the budget this year. You guys adopted a budget with that position in it. So moving forward, we're going to try to get some of that done. Because
What was the designation?
My guess, if I was speculating, it has to do with when they purchased the property in 2010, because they took a large loan, which were a grant from the URA, $800,000 to do it. He secured that on the property, right? So they may have used that designation to sort of soften that landing with that
No.
purchase.
Home loans don't have anything to do with the age of people, it has to do with the income.
unless it's a
Those
specific
two
preference.
things, right, but it's about keeping housing affordable. And so home loans are used to create housing and designate a certain number of units in market income units. And in buildings that have already been existing, like this one, to do renovations. Because when rents are lower, it's harder for landlords to maintain the buildings.
Sure.
Because they're not getting the rent limits. And so home monies are used so people can put a roof on the building, so they can upgrade HVAC, so they can deal with upgrades in electrical codes and things of that nature to keep
I
those
see.
properties safe and keep the rents at a stable level. Because the rent rolls don't support that type of capital investment by the owner. And so that's what happens. So we given home monies to that group, right? Titus, home monies have been used for, what is that, 203 Roundton? And so in there's a certain number of units that are set aside that have to follow HUD regulations. And say you were to give money to a market rate unit, we would say, we're giving you money to keep 5 units in this building market rate. And it is
Floating.
subsidizing the development of these units, and they have to stay affordable in this market rate building for 20 years. And every year you have to certify through paperwork that these units, these specific units, are being rented out to people who need a certain affordability level. And so there's layering,
Yes.
right? And again, because I know we've been talking about this, but it's just important to be really clear. We've been sitting here for the past 6 years going, oh my God, right? Not even the past 6 years. I think these are things that we really looked at in year 1 and year 2 before we even got our IDE. That's literally going through a lot of these pilots, seeing how they weren't well written, well researched, how compliance weren't done, how there were not necessarily clawbacks written into them, right? And so it's going to inform us going forward what needs to be in these contracts, the types of clawbacks, the type of compliance that has to be done to ensure that people are following up on what is in their contracts. And then us acting on clawbacks if they're not, right? And then people are going above their numbers, adding a number in there to make sure that the school district is whole. Right, so now we're also doing the studies, what is that?
Ergonomics.
Ergonomics,
Yeah.
ergonomics. So now the ergonomic study is coming, and that studies to inform us and improve, right? So we talk about is a continual quality improvement.
Yes.
So that's what we're doing here.
But it's really important, I think, that the residents understand because they have seen some. In the
People hear
past,
what they want to hear and they repeat what they want to repeat. Right? And that's unfortunate. People hear snippets and they hold on to it as it's the gospel truth. And they can't hear anything outside of that because it's not just a distrust of this government, it's a distrust of government.
Yeah.
Internationally, nationally, state, county, and local, right? And so that's why sometimes we take out this time not to defend ourselves, but to make clear and put it on the record, right? Because without a record and without clarity, people create their own narratives and it just causes more confusion. But we are doing the work and I am proud of the work that we're doing. And you will continue to make improvements, right? Because that's what you have to do. In your home, you might redo your kitchen. And once you redo your kitchen, you're like, that is done. Right? And so that's what we're doing. Every time we make an improvement, we see other opportunities to make improvement and we will continue.
And let me just say this, and this is why, providing information as it comes to you. Well, first of all, I guess getting information and vetting information and looking into the details of it to find out nowadays with all this in AI and all this other stuff, you gotta double check, triple, quadruple check to make sure that the information that's coming across your desk is actually accurate or not.
Yeah.
Right?
First step.
And so therefore, for me, in the role of being the chief financial officer for this city and understanding all that's going on, the impacts that it has. In all of the agencies, inclusive of even a partnership with the school district, we have the very same tax base that we're talking about. We have to make sure that we're doing all due diligence with the information that we receive it. And we're going to receive it. I don't have a problem. They tell me they just brings these points up today, and I say, fine, send it to me, let's look into it, let's go look into it, because we need to make sure that we're following up on information that we have, not ignoring the information. When it comes to these pilots, we know that historically they just have been horrific, right? And how they've written to, and even their forecasting ahead as to what the impact was going to be on this community, right? And two, that there also wasn't this real due diligence around compliance and making sure that people kept to what were actually part of even the skimpy requirements that were in the day one agreements in the first place, but even to those, right? Now, as we're going forward, though, we're going to need to make sure that we have really robust ability to administer the pilot agreements and to follow up on that and make sure that they are compliant if we are going to grant agreements and to whatever extent that is. And that, to me, should be something that we, the taxpayers or the city, shoulders as a fiscal responsibility. And so even in these pilots, there has to be some sort of ongoing administrative fees that make sure that we are able to make sure that our people are able to go back out there, do and check and make sure, for example, this situation where you've got a situation that we don't know because we weren't there. Thought process may have been that this was going to be a building that was 55 and over, and there weren't going to be any children. That's what they may have presented even in the application, because we don't even know what the application says because we don't have records for that, right? But
This is what, a third-year pilot,
Yeah.
you want your legacy to be different.
Right, exactly. So, well, first of all, I want us to move away from these 30-year pilots, right? And figure out, shorter pilots make better sense to me, but this 30-year thing just is problematic. But I think that to my point is that we got to make sure that we also have the infrastructure in place to ensure that what is promised at the time and what the expectations are, that they are met. And if they're not, that there are ramifications around not having it done. Simple as that.
And may I also say, because amen, yes, well, may I also say that at this point in time, we have an outside counsel who specializes in IDAs, and part of using that outside counsel for this process is making us consistent with the rest of the IDAs region, and also the fact that he sits in these meetings, which is wonderful, because now he's taking note that there needs to be a compliance component to the agreement that perhaps there was not before. So we are all moving forward, we all agree, and I just wanted to say that, some of this is just teaching and learning and figuring out where our errors are and moving forward. But I'm open, at least as the acting for the period of time I'm here, to making sure that we proceed with that. So.
So just one last thing on this
Yeah.
issue, because we talked about the infrastructure, and we've been talking about it privately, right? But now, and we spoke about it in the meetings. We do have to hopefully civil service job description. We had done some soft working up with a new job description for the IDA director slash economic development person, right? So we need to look at that to make sure that we have designed that properly. That we are getting it passed on the civil service board. But then, again, when you talked about infrastructure, that person is not a one-man shop. It can't be a one-man shop because there are other things that need to happen. And so we've spoken about making sure that we put a support person also in the IDA to have a role in helping to carry out some of the administrative oversight and the constant relationship building, right? We respectfully, the chamber is what the chamber is. And I'm gonna say that. Chamber is what the chamber is. The city needs to have someone who has constant relationship, right? And through the IDA is where it should be happening, through the IDA, urban renewal agency, whatever. When we came in here, we couldn't find a list of businesses that are active, that is current, who is manufacturing what. We might have people on the tax rolls, but we don't know what's been created in some of these places. And so when COVID came, we went out to Washington State to find electric thermometers, right? When they're being made in warehouse here in Washington Street. And what's crazy, right? So the level of infrastructure that needs to be there for the pilots, for the economic development, for the industrial development, for the commercial relationships and industrial relationships that this city needs to maintain so that we can have proper inventory, can't just be left to the chamber or to a bid. It has to also reside somewhere within the city. So as other people change, the city still has that access, still has those relationships, and that we're using it in the planning of economic development and empowerment of our city. And so I look forward to this board coming together. We're gonna have a committee that puts this together so that we can begin to move forward on finalizing these job descriptions look like, getting them through the civil service process and passing. We do have money in the budget that we are giving to the city to create an IDA director slash economic development person. We have to vote on that, right? So we need to solidify that. And then we've talked consistently about the fact that it shouldn't be a one-person shop, that we need to provide that second supportive and high level, not part-time administrative assistant, but someone who's really working so that there can be a team. Oftentimes we hear that we overstaff. We don't overstaff, we all get understaffed and then expect someone to make miracles by themselves. But if we don't invest in the economic development of this community, then we'll continue to get the returns that we've seen. That's not much at all.
So I agree. So I think that from a physical perspective, here's what I envision. It's me on both sides of it. We propose to the city budget that there be an executive, that there be a director of economic development. And that person also be the executive director. And there's a job description already that was created for that. Mr. Mayor's talking about it.
But we never got.
No, we did.
Well, not the IDA side. We did have the economic development, but we didn't do the IDA portion.
And I think that the job description needs to be reviewed, because it was actually, created, I guess, through some service that talks about IDA, that person also be the executive director of IDA, right? Which means that there's a certain caliber of person that you're gonna be looking for that you can have to pay, so. Shared responsibilities, shared services is that the city will take on the benefits part. The IDA take on the salary part, right? Shared responsibility for that. Then we have the director, position that is already been established and decide, what want to do with that. My thought process is that you do need both. So one needs to focus in on it's one needs to focus in broader development of a complete economic development plan. But if committee can look at it and decide. The third thing that you need is you can have professionals that also can have that administrative support. So you don't have to have somebody that's going to be support. So minimally, I think that you're talking about 2 or 3 people that are specifically focused in this economic development, IDA of the city itself, right? With and there has to be some very clear targets and goals for that person, goals for that team to meet and measures. So if they're not doing it, then what needs to happen if they don't, right? As you move forward. The other piece of it, part of this is that we also, I'm also asking that IDA also take on half of the salary for the accountant. They're paying, the city's paying for the accountant, primarily spending 50% of his time doing IDA stuff, right? So I think from a structural standpoint, right, having a executive director, who is director of economic development, who is the big picture, kind of really get out there, get the plan done, implement it, pull it through. I mean, somebody who's going to specifically begin to work with our business community to make sure and to nurture them, have the skill set to actually do that. Right, along with, of course, whatever administrative support they need to do that will be the start for it. But this is a revenue generating operation, and so therefore there has to be some very clear targets, measures for which that team has to realize. Otherwise, there has to be a recalibration of what that is. Simple as that, because out of that team will also be able to ensure the compliance, follow up with all of the pilots, make sure that people are doing what they're supposed to be doing, engage with our partners such as the school district and on the things that all become of concern. So for example, the school district finds out that there's 10 kids that are in the building that ain't got 10 kids in it. We need to be able to make sure to go on that, figure out how we want to address that, right? Right,
And that doesn't go to the building department or.
Right.
That we
Right.
have a team and mechanism in place.
to do wonderful.
Because if you don't monitor it, you can't manage. Right?
And that's been the problem.
And that's always been the problem. You have high people, the line of the staff, and you don't have the middle to go out there and to do, they need to do it that way. And that's the biggest challenge, one of the biggest challenges.
It's a powerful tool. It's a powerful tool. So to change the economics in the city. Really.
And we need to
Yeah.
make it be that. So let's, so I think what we do, what we'll do is we'll pull the job description. I think that, we can come together in a subcommittee, look at it. I think maybe what we'll do is just pull the job description, send them back out to the entire board first of all, and have people give feedback and then go from there, yeah. Pull the two that.
Yeah.
When we looked at the salary, I studied, the same patterns, the Yonkers, New Show, White Plains, and that's how we came up with what we put in the budget, right? And I think this is a prime opportunity for us to get this position because there's so many of the layoffs and the downsizing that is happening in the federal level. As I talk to some of my people who I've met walks away across the country, they're like,
Buyer's market.
there are people who you might be able to get, who you never would have been able to afford before.
I think that's right.
And Mount Vernon is the place that they would want to come in and make a difference. It's not just about the salary, but it's about the ability to make impacts, right? And of course, you have, people all over federal benefits, so, that's a help, but, this is the time, and I just want to make sure that this time that we're seizing the opportunity, we're having incredible conversations with industrial and commercial people right now, that there are great opportunities that are on the horizon for us. Opportunity zones under this current administration federally are being put back on the table.
And
And the last time they were on the table, Mount Vernon missed the mark 100%, almost 95%. We got like one opportunity zone when the communities around us that are wealthier had 4 and 5 and 8 designated opportunity zones. So we don't have another cycle of development, of the economic development of any of these things to miss. We are focused, while this is the idea between comprehensive planning, rezoning, downtown investment, all of these things, the infrastructure work that we've done, which had to be the groundwork for all of this. We gotta do that. We gotta do that.
so if I can just say, opportunity zones are a way to provide tax benefit to developers that is separate from the pilot, that state or federal implications. So developers love them. We developed them, never used them. So now we're talking about maybe creating a second one, having our first one, implementing it, and including a second one. So we can bring good development here, which would not necessarily mean we need to do a pilot because, believe it or not, people pay more in federal income tax than they do anything else. They worry about that more than anything else. So these are,
Brownfield designation.
yeah, these are all ways to work around.
To break down the silos of IDA or economic development and get it done.
And if
I know we have.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Go through.
Thank you.
Same, yes.
Yeah,
For the set.
okay.
We got resolutions every day,
Yes.
hold on, as I want to
Okay.
read it.
All right, let's move forward with that, and then, we can come back to some of the other matters that don't need approvals. I have
Resolution.
no resolution, sorry, I'm on the wrong. Okay, resolution authorizing payment of invoices, I believe there's a few invoices for this month, one of them is our fees, insurance fund fee and the CPA fee, totaling about $4,000 in total. Has everyone had a chance to review the resolution, and if so, is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Moved by Dr. Morton, is there a second?
My second.
By member Vanderpool, any discussion, all in favor?
Time.
Matter passes 3-0. The next, there's no more resolutions, there will be, old business and new business, which is sort of tied into the business development report. Quickly, we're going back to Titus, that was mentioned a little earlier. There was a letter received by, our executive director from the applicant's attorney and the applicant seeking a pilot extension request. As we discussed earlier, there's a lot of, issues related to this development.
Sure.
It's very premature.
That's the point of the.
We've told them that.
Thank.
Okay. There's also been as you know, I think an application submitted by Heritage House South related to a pilot modification. That is also premature. They have not gotten us the requisite information for you to be able to analyze it or from this source be able to analyze the project. Next issue is discussion of our 2026 goals. I think you kind of hit that earlier about the potential executive director, potential administrative help, working with the Chamber of Commerce and others to force the business in different ways. Anything else that anyone would like to discuss?
No, I think that's the most important. I think the most important thing for us is to make sure that we have, the IDA actually fully functioning in the way in which it is going to realize the economic benefits that we wanted to actually, fulfill. I think that's gotta be our focus now. We've spent, you said 6 years, I think, yeah, I guess it is 6 years. We've spent these years kind of digging out and finding and thinking that we got it and it's all set and it's all done and we've gotten all it behind us only to, peel back another layer of onion and find out that there's something rotten underneath of it. Right? And so I think now is the time for us to, even if we still have to do that, to be running parallel tracks where we now also are creating a clear infrastructure and, with a forecasting plan, with a vision plan that says, here is what IDA is going to look like. This is what we want it to be and how we want it to benefit this city, right? And I say that, I guess, now as being a saged comptroller of this wonderful city, that of what the real needs are. I stay up at night just trying to figure it out. This is so much. It's just, right? So I think that at this point now, we can't continue to be digging out. We gotta dig out how we also build. We don't. Yeah, so we don't, it's just never going to do. So-
Yeah, on the backside, I think, the projects that were in the past, are paying their pilots. Generally, 95 to 98%, they're paying their admin fees, 95 to 98%. This tightest thing came up, which we're gonna fix in the next, few months. How the designation is senior, whatever, we'll figure that out. There may have been a mistake back in 2010. It looks like it was an affordable 68 AMI project. But there are, everything, the train is running in the right direction. The future is what this board will have to determine what kind of projects they want, what kind of developers they want, and then how the city will be, revitalized to an economic engine.
And the existing projects, and people need to make sure that they understand it, because we're seeing this, right? That you can't come here with the same old story. Just not happening, right? Just realize that that's not what it is.
Yep.
So while we have to take, when I was a young administrator, said, listen, when you go to do job, do an environmental scan. Somebody needs to tell them they need to do an environmental scan now and realize what the environment is now. It ain't what it was then, so don't come here.
And we are pushing them to give us information early on, any developer to say, if you are looking for anything, you have to explain why you need it and why it benefits the city and or the IDA and or the school district. So we are putting them to the fire early on, make sure that the packets are full before it even comes to you, from a board level.
And I think we just have to also clarify clear rules between the IDA, city council, right? The planning department, the building department, and how we work separately and together. Right? Because what happens is the developers are going before the council around zoning. Council is negotiating benefits. Agreements and conversations are being had too long.
Yep.
Investors are investing money in these development soft costs. Then they have to go before the boards. And then they come here. And when they come here, they can spend years before the council, years before the boards. And then they come here having spent millions, oftentimes millions, right? With an expectation that once it gets here, that they're going to get benefits that were not discussed in those previous places. And then there's this added pressure for this board to do something. And while I understand the projects have to be developed and the zoning and the variances have to be worked out to determine how many units or something like this, that you can't wait for the economic analysis project to be the last thing that's done.
Right, it should be first.
It should be right, or it should be happening kind of consecutively, because the planning board doesn't say you get to have this many units, once that's determined, planning board might say, this is what your site plan is, but they're not talking about the number, the height of the building and the number of units that you can fit into those buildings, right? Or the AMIs. And so we have to have that conversation. And then the last thing that I'll say on this is between this board and the council and whatever is supposed to happen, right? I think we need to also formally adopt the kind of affordability model, right? Because when we're here talking about market rate projects, I think the days of these 58% AMI projects are done. Right? They're done unless HCR decides to raise the AMI average on what they will fund in our communities. I'm gonna say it again. Unless HCR makes the decision to raise the average AMI and is not just giving big discounts and funding to projects that are at 58% AMI. But now you're talking about projects that are at 80% AMI, 90%. We can't continue to support, we can't support these projects. They're not sustainable. Like, they're just not. They're not sustainable, right? So what Mount Vernon has not done in the last 20 years, except for maybe one or two buildings, is to build market rate units. Just haven't. And we have an opportunity. There are a lot of people who are interested in doing market rate units. And if we say there's a 10%, you want 300 units, 10% of them need to be at a certain AMI band.
Yep.
Yonkers has done it, New Rochelle's done it, White Plains has done it. And so if you need to create 500 units of affordable workforce housing, you can do it within a market rate economy. And it works out better socially because you're not just continuing to segregate people in this community based on their income. And when you're not segregating the community based on their income, then you're creating more vibrant neighborhoods where there are services, where there are cleaners, where there are supermarkets, where there are stores, where there are cafes throughout the city. We can do a comprehensive plan and we can do a rezoning. But if we don't sit here and do this housing affordability kind of reassessment and create a clear policy that says, okay, 10%. And if you want certain variances or density bonuses, it might be 15%, right? But that's the way it makes sense. And that's the way we should be creating affordability in our community, not just by segregating people by incomes anymore. It is an old model. It is an unproductive model. It is a model that they talked against in our 1968 comprehensive plan, but we continue down that same path for the last 57 years, and it hasn't worked out well for us. So if we're going to make the adjustments, let's make the adjustments. And I think parents who are working class should not have to live in a neighborhood that is poor. They should be able to live in a place where their children can see progress and advancement. I don't think that families should be forced to live in housing that does not allow them to go out and get a new job, or if they go out for job training and they go and get a new job, that they can lose their housing because now they exceed the income band. So what we have done, people keep saying Mount Vernon is poor. We're not poor. We've had poor practices that have stymied, undermined the economic advancement of so many of our residents in this community who go out and get more education and training. But then when you realize that you're going to lose your housing because you're outside the financial economic band or the AMI band, then you can't take advantage, right? So we're talking about dignity, we're talking about opportunity, we're talking about financial empowerment, and we're talking about creating an environment where people can grow, right? This is all about economic advancement for all, not saying that because you started at this station, you have to stay at the station and you never get an opportunity to grow, because as soon as you step over the line, you're losing much of what is allowed. You have some level of safety net. And then people recoil and they don't want to move forward. We cannot continue that, and we can't do it because the state is offering us these employees. We can't do it because the county is offering economic benefits. It has to be better. It has worked in every community around us, and Mount Vernon cannot continue to move forward without very, very clear policies around this. And so, this is something that I want to work with the council on and with the IDA so that we are in sync as we go forward, because this is the way that everyone is now.
If I may, Chair, the county required, the program you're talking about is called Set Aside Program. The county about, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago everyone needs to put in, because of what's happening in the county, with the lawsuit, everyone needs to put together a set aside program. Mount Vernon does have a set aside statute. However, it's unclear. And we need to clarify that statute, which will be going in front of the city council here very soon. So, you're going to see those changes starting to occur. We've been working toward it and we continue. We've already discussed it, as a matter of fact. So because this meeting has gone long, do you want to continue or can we quit?
Let me do two quick things.
Okay,
We have to do an acknowledgement of a fiduciary duty statement that every board member will have to fill out. That was in your packet. We will bother you to ensure that each of you fill that in. It's requirement under the Public Authorities Accountability Act. So that's in your packet. If you can look at that, fill that out, and then return it to Pam, and then we'll get it to us, and we can file it where we need to. Last issue is a confidential board evaluation. That's also in your packet. If you could fill that out too, and provide it to Pam, we can keep it for our records. Meeting calendar for 2026. Our next meeting will be January 8th, and I believe the calendar has been set to everyone also for the year. Final issue, I know some people are aware of it. The National Gear and Piston some time ago filed a notice of claim against the IDA and the city related to the collapse of the roof that allegedly damaged their trucks and other equipment. They have now filed a lawsuit that was filed maybe 25, 30 days ago. I've been talking to Ryan about it briefly. The city is named, and so is the IDA. Probably the city will get out because the IDA did own the property. So we've adjourned that matter to get additional time to respond, and we will keep everyone posted and provide everyone with a copy of the complaint. Pam has it in her inbox.
okay. And if I could, one other thing.
That's all I.
We have a project where they are requesting a lease from the IDA. They would like to move that forward as quickly as possible. They've been in process for 5 years. I've suggested to them that they need to tell the board exactly what their ask is. If their ask comes forward and it makes sense, I will be bringing that probably to the next meeting. If it doesn't make sense, you can simply tell them that, or you can tell me and I'll call them beforehand. But that is how we'll be doing these. They'll submit an ask. I will submit it to you. You can tell me whether you want to move forward or you don't want to. So on that note.
All I have is there a motion to adjourn the meeting. Second,
Second.
all in favor? Meeting is adjourned, even if you don't vote for it.
You can't vote on it, but it's sort of.
It's not really, but the
Yeah.
meeting's here.
But it's adjourned. Okay.